Can I stay? The exhausted white woman's question barely rose above the cafeteria's fluorescent hum. Elijah Brooks looked at the single dinner plate left between him and his 9-year-old daughter, then quietly pushed the stainless steel tray toward the stranger. Ava broke her last piece of bread in half and added it to the plate. Across the room, cafeteria manager Marcus Doyle stiffened. That table is not available, he said. Ava looked at her father. She looks scared, Daddy. 3 hours earlier, Elijah had been tightening a corroded valve beneath a sink on the hospital's 7th floor. His Navy maintenance shirt darkened between the shoulders. The pipe smelled of rust and disinfectant. Somewhere beyond the wall, a heart monitor kept time with a tired electronic pulse. Elijah worked slowly, listening for the thin whistle that meant pressure was still escaping. He found it beneath the coupling, wrapped the thread, and tightened it until the sound disappeared. He preferred repairs that announced when they were finished. People rarely did. At 10:47 p.m., he signed the service log with the same black pen clipped beside his worn employee badge. Ava waited on a folding chair near his toolbox, doing homework beneath a light that flickered every few seconds. Her school had closed early after a burst pipe, and the sitter had canceled. Elijah had apologized twice to his supervisor for bringing her. Ava had apologized once, though no child should have needed to. You hungry? He asked. She nodded without looking up from her fractions. They reached St. Catherine's cafeteria 12 minutes before closing. The air smelled of reheated gravy, industrial soap, and coffee that had been sitting too long. Most of the serving wells were empty. Behind the counter, Marcus Doyle was directing an employee to cover a tray of untouched rolls. His tie remained perfectly centered despite the hour. One plate left, the cashier said. Elijah glanced at Ava. That's enough. He paid in coins and folded bills, then carried the tray toward a table near the windows. Marcus intercepted him by placing 2 fingers against the tray's edge. Not that section, Elijah. We keep it open for physicians and special guests. There was no reserved sign. No rope. Only 8 empty chairs reflecting in the dark glass. Elijah looked at Marcus, then at Ava. We'll move. Marcus smiled with the relief of a man whose cruelty had been mistaken for procedure. I appreciate your cooperation. Elijah chose a smaller table beside a silent vending machine. He divided the potatoes with a plastic fork and slid the larger portion toward Ava. Before either of them ate, a woman entered alone. Her cream-colored blouse was creased at the elbows, and she carried an expensive coat as though she had forgotten it belonged to her. A temporary visitor badge faced inward against her chest. Her phone vibrated inside her hand. Again, then again, but she silenced it without reading the screen. She passed the physician's table, paused beside Elijah, and lowered herself into the empty chair as if her knees had made the decision. Only then did she seem to realize she was not alone. Her eyes moved from Ava to Elijah, then to the plate. I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought this table was empty. Elijah noticed the faint red mark around her wrist from a hospital identification band recently removed. He also noticed that she had been crying carefully, the kind of crying done in bathrooms, elevators, and rooms where someone else needed you to be strong. You don't have to leave, he said. Her breath caught. Can I stay? Elijah moved the plate toward her. Ava watched him, then broke her bread. Marcus crossed the room before the woman could lift the fork. Ma'am, there are more appropriate seats available. This area is being cleared. Elijah's hand remained beside the tray. She's already sitting. Marcus kept his voice pleasant. Some seats are reserved for people the hospital depends on. Elijah met his eyes. Everybody in here depends on somebody. For 1 second, the woman looked at him as if that sentence had reached a place no title ever had. Above them, the security camera made a soft mechanical click and turned. The woman finally touched the tray. As she lifted the plate, a strip of faded paper appeared beneath it, stuck to the scratched steel by a drop of gravy. She peeled it loose. Printed across the top were 4 words that should not have been there. B-17, family support meal. Charlotte held the damp strip of paper between 2 fingers. B-17, family support meal. she read softly. Marcus Doyle's smile tightened by a fraction. Old inventory label, he said. Nothing you need to worry about. Elijah glanced at the tray, then at Marcus. That program ended years ago. The cafeteria's refrigerator compressors hummed beneath the silence, low and mechanical, while fluorescent lights slid across the gravy stain darkening the edge of the label. Charlotte did not look convinced, but she did not look at Elijah with trust either. Not yet. Before she could ask another question, the double doors opened and Dr. Victor Hale entered with 2 members of the hospital's donor advisory board. His white coat was pressed sharply enough to hold a crease, and the silver nameplate above his pocket caught the light before his eyes settled on the table. Marcus, he said, I thought the window section was being kept available. It is, Doctor. Then why is it occupied? Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice into the careful tone of someone correcting a misunderstanding rather than creating one. Mr. Brooks was just moving. His daughter's school closed early, and he had nowhere else to place her during the remainder of his shift. Ava's fingers stopped around the half piece of bread. Elijah noticed. He set his palm over the torn edge of her paper napkin before she could begin folding it smaller. She's with me, he said. That was already approved. Victor's gaze passed over Elijah's faded navy work shirt, the grease shadow along one cuff, and the employee badge scratched cloudy from years of use. Then he looked at Ava's backpack beneath the chair as if it were a misplaced toolbox. Approved for the building, perhaps. Not for every professional space in it. We're eating. This is not personal. It usually isn't called personal. The words were quiet, but they landed cleanly. For a moment, even the ice machine seemed louder. Victor adjusted one cuff and gave Elijah the patient expression reserved for people he believed required simpler language. Your family circumstances are unfortunate, Mr. Brooks, but they cannot become an operational concern for the hospital. Ava lowered her eyes. Elijah saw the color rise in her cheeks and immediately stood, not because Victor had one, but because his daughter should not have to remain seated while adults discussed her as a problem. He gathered her homework sheets, slid the bread into a paper bag, and zipped her backpack himself. Come on, baby girl. Ava looked toward Charlotte. Is she coming too? She can decide where she belongs. Charlotte's face changed at that. Not softened, exactly, but interrupted. She watched Elijah kneel to retie Ava's loose shoelace, his hands steady despite the muscle tightening along his jaw. He did not tell his daughter that Victor was wrong. He did not ask her to be brave for him. You didn't do anything wrong, he said. Understand? Ava nodded. Yes, sir. Marcus cleared his throat and reached for the tray. Charlotte placed her hand over the faded B-17 label before he could remove it. What policy reserves this section? She asked. Marcus glanced at Victor, then back at her temporary visitor badge, still turned inward. It's a matter of professional courtesy. Where is it written? Not every standard needs to be written down. Victor offered a restrained smile. Hospitals rely on judgment. Structure matters in places like this. Charlotte studied him, then looked past him at the 2 donors waiting beside an empty table. Neither wore an employee badge. Neither had been asked to move. Marcus took a carbon copy form from the service counter and began writing. The pen scratched across the paper in short, practiced strokes. Elijah caught the heading before Marcus angled it away. Unauthorized use of staff dining area. You're documenting this? Elijah asked. Only to protect everyone involved. From what? Future confusion. Marcus tore off the yellow copy and held it out. Elijah accepted it without reading, folded it once, and tucked it behind his worn employee badge. Charlotte's gaze followed the paper. Above Marcus's shoulder, a framed sign in brushed silver letters read "Compassion starts here." The phrase reflected faintly in the cafeteria window beside Elijah and Ava as they walked toward the hallway, their shapes reduced to dark outlines against the glass. Charlotte lifted her phone and quietly took one photograph. Marcus holding the white original, the slogan above him, and Elijah's empty chair in the foreground. Marcus noticed the movement. Photography isn't encouraged in patient areas, he said pleasantly. This isn't a patient area, Charlotte replied. He paused, realizing too late that he had just contradicted his own reason for removing Elijah. Then he slipped the report into a blue binder on the counter. Charlotte expected an employee personnel file. Instead, the label on its spine read Community Conduct Metrics. Charlotte watched Marcus slide the report into the binder marked Community Conduct Metrics, then close it with the flat of his hand. The sound was soft, almost polite. Down the hall, Elijah and Ava were already disappearing beneath the colder lights of the oncology wing. Charlotte looked once more at the photograph on her phone. The empty chair, the silver words "Compassion starts here," the yellow report folded behind Elijah's badge, then followed at a distance. Elijah did not look back. His maintenance cart rolled unevenly because the front wheel had worn flat on one side, producing a small click every third turn. Ava walked beside him, carrying her backpack against her chest. The bread Marcus had allowed them to take rested inside a brown paper bag between Elijah's toolbox and a stack of clean filters. "Dad," Ava said. "Yeah. Did I get you in trouble?" Elijah stopped so quickly the cart's loose wrench tapped against the metal tray. He crouched until they were eye to eye. "No, but that man wrote your name down. That was his choice. You brought me. That was mine." The hallway smelled of floor wax, warm dust, and the faint sweetness of powdered cocoa from a vending machine near the elevators. Elijah smoothed the edge of Ava's homework page where it had bent inside her bag. "You are not a problem I brought to work," he said. "You're my daughter. Don't let anybody arrange those words differently." Ava nodded, though her eyes remained on the faded toes of her sneakers. The sole of the left shoe had begun to separate again. Elijah noticed the thin black opening but said nothing. At the end of the corridor, beside a dark family waiting room, he unlocked the lower cabinet of his maintenance cart. Inside were 3 cardboard soup containers wrapped in towels to hold the heat. Ava looked at them, then at him. "Those are the Thursday meals." "They are. I thought the program was closed." "The office closed it." Elijah lifted the first container carefully. Hunger didn't. He carried it to a woman sleeping upright beside room 714, one hand still wrapped around the strap of her son's backpack. Elijah did not wake her. He placed the soup on the side table with 2 packets of crackers and wrote the current time on the lid so she would know whether it was still safe to eat. The second meal went to an older veteran sitting near the elevators in a coat too thin for the weather. Elijah checked the bus schedule taped to the wall, saw the final shuttle had been delayed, and placed the warm container in the man's hands. "You eat first," he said. "Then I'll find out where your ride is." The third went to a man standing outside the pharmacy window, staring at an empty space in his palm where a phone had once been. A paper receipt trembled between his fingers. Elijah did not ask what he had sold. He only handed him the soup and pointed toward the quiet corner near the chapel. "There's water in there." Charlotte remained behind a support column, close enough to hear but far enough that Elijah did not notice her. She had spent years reading reports about outreach, access, and patient experience. None of those reports had ever mentioned a maintenance worker checking expiration times with a black marker or memorizing which waiting rooms stayed cold after midnight. Elijah returned to the cart and opened a small pocket notebook. The cover was softened by grease and years of use. Inside, he marked 3 room numbers with short lines. Beside one number, he had written "no dairy." Beside another, "soft food." No names.
No diagnosis.
Just enough information to keep someone safe. Charlotte's expression tightened. Kindness alone did not make the process responsible. Food allergies mattered. Storage temperatures mattered. Liability mattered. She could not decide whether Elijah had quietly built something humane or whether desperation had forced him into a system no one was supervising. Ava leaned against the cart. "My shoes are okay for Friday," she said. "I can use the gray tape." Elijah looked down at the separated sole. "Your music program is Friday." "I know. You need shoes that don't talk when you walk." Ava smiled a little. "Maybe they're singing." Elijah reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded $20 bill. For 1 second, he held it between his thumb and forefinger. Charlotte saw his eyes move toward Ava's shoe, then toward the service elevator where Rosa Martinez waited beside a stainless steel food cart. Elijah crossed the hall and placed the bill into a worn envelope labeled B-17. Rosa accepted it without counting. "That's the last of it?" she asked quietly. "For this week. Elijah, Ava needs. Tape will hold 2 more days." Rosa's mouth pressed into a line. "Kindness doesn't pay rent." "No," Elijah said, "but neither does looking away." He did not say it proudly. He said it like a man checking a bolt he had tightened many times before. Ava took a roll of gray repair tape from the toolbox and sat on the bench. Elijah knelt beside her and showed her how to press the loose sole closed while keeping the adhesive away from her sock. He let her smooth the final strip herself. It was a child's repair, crooked but firm. "There," Ava said. "Good as new. Good enough for now." As Elijah stood, his sleeve brushed the stainless steel tray on Rosa's cart. The faded B-17 label from the cafeteria was still stuck to its edge. The gravy stain now dried brown around the lettering. Elijah peeled it away before it could fall, wiped the metal clean with a folded cloth, then slipped the label into the back of his notebook instead of throwing it out. Charlotte saw something else inside the envelope Rosa had not yet closed. An old hospital seal and a printed line blacked out with marker. She stepped closer after Elijah and Ava moved toward the elevators. Under the fluorescent light, the words beneath the ink were barely visible, but visible enough. Donor identity withheld by request. Charlotte looked from the envelope to Elijah's repaired cart clicking down the hall, and for the first time she understood that the meals were not random acts of charity. Someone had built a record, and someone else had worked very hard to erase the name behind it. By morning, the envelope marked B-17 was no longer in Rosa Martinez's drawer. Marcus Doyle had it spread open beneath the cafeteria office lamp, the folded $20 bill beside it and Elijah's name written across a fresh incident form. "Unauthorized collection of cash," Marcus said. "Unapproved food distribution." Rosa stood across from him, her hands clenched inside her apron pockets. "Those meals were paid for. That is not the issue." "Then what is?" The refrigerator motors vibrated through the thin office wall, making the metal blinds tremble against the window. Outside, breakfast trays struck the serving counter in quick, hollow bursts, while Marcus kept his voice measured enough to sound reasonable to anyone passing in the hall. "The issue is safety," he said. "If someone receives the wrong meal, if there is an allergic reaction, if money changes hands without documentation, the hospital carries the liability." Charlotte stood near the doorway wearing the same plain coat from the night before. Her temporary visitor badge still faced inward. She had returned before sunrise after asking Emily Carter to examine B-17 without using an executive account. Emily's first message had arrived at 6:12 a.m. Program terminated 37 months ago. No active donor. No authorized distribution. On paper, Marcus's concern made sense. Elijah had collected no signatures from recipients. Rosa had accepted cash outside the main register. Meals had moved through a program the hospital officially claimed did not exist. Charlotte looked toward Elijah, waiting for him to defend himself. He did not. He stood beside his maintenance cart with the yellow conduct report still folded behind his scratched employee badge. "Are the 3 meals for tonight already prepared?" he asked. Marcus blinked. "That is not relevant." "Are they prepared?" "They will not be distributed until this review is complete." Rosa's eyes moved toward the oncology elevators. "One is for Mrs. Bell. Her son starts another round today." Marcus turned sharply. "Rosa." The warning was quiet, but her name landed like a door closing. Elijah's jaw tightened once. He did not argue about the form or the money. He reached into his pocket, counted the few bills left from the week, and walked toward the vending alcove. Packaged soup, crackers, and a bottle of water cost almost 3 times what Rosa could prepare through the kitchen. Elijah paid anyway. The machine rejected one bill twice before finally swallowing it. Charlotte watched him gather the food without looking back at Marcus. He was not behaving like a man trying to protect a scheme. He was behaving like a man unwilling to let an investigation become someone else's empty stomach. You understand, Marcus said to Charlotte. Good intentions can still create dangerous outcomes. I understand that, she replied. She meant it. Kindness did not exempt anyone from food safety, financial controls, or patient privacy. But neither did policy explain why Marcus knew exactly where Rosa kept the B-17 envelopes when the program had supposedly been closed for 3 years. Elijah returned carrying the vending machine food in a clear plastic bag. As he passed the office desk, his eyes settled on the receipt roll beside Marcus's elbow. The top slip was numbered 4818. The stub beneath it showed 4816. Elijah stopped. Where's 4817? Marcus placed his palm over the roll.
Recapes jam.
Numbers skip. Elijah did not reach for it. He tilted his head toward the small office window, where morning light cut across the paper at an angle. A torn edge showed beneath Marcus's hand, fresh and feathered, not the smooth cut made by the printer blade. Rosa saw it too. That one printed last night, she said. It was already torn when I closed. Marcus pulled the roll toward himself. You are mistaken. From the hallway, Ava sat on a bench with her repaired shoe tucked beneath her backpack. She looked up from her spelling sheet. Ms. Rosa wrote on the back, she said. Every adult turned toward her. Ava's voice grew smaller, but she did not change the words. I saw her when Dad gave her the money. Elijah crossed the hall and rested a hand on Ava's shoulder. That's enough, baby girl. He did not ask her to prove anything. He would not turn his daughter into a witness for adults who had already made her feel unwelcome. Charlotte stepped closer to the desk. Marcus lifted the receipt roll and dropped it into a drawer. There is no mystery here, he said. Mr. Brooks paid for food outside approved channels. Rosa created an informal notation. I removed the receipt because the transaction was void. When did you void it? Charlotte asked. Last night, shortly after closing. You were at the donor table shortly after closing. Marcus paused for less than a second. Then it was handled this morning. The correction was smooth, but too quick. He had changed the time before anyone accused him of touching the system. Charlotte said nothing publicly. Beneath her coat, her phone vibrated once. Emily had found the missing transaction in the kitchen printer log. Receipt 4817 had been created at 10:58 p.m., paid in cash, then edited at 6:04 that morning. The payer field had originally read EB. Before the record was altered, the machine had captured one final note entered by Rosa. Generator job. Charlotte looked through the office glass at Elijah carrying overpriced soup toward the oncology elevators. Then she looked back at Marcus's locked drawer. Only one management credential had accessed receipt 4817 at 6:04 a.m., and it belonged to the man now insisting the receipt had never mattered. At 6:04 that morning, someone using Marcus Doyle's credentials had changed receipt 4817. By 8:17, Elijah Brooks was kneeling beside a medication warming station on the oncology floor, unaware that Charlotte Whitmore now had proof his name had been removed from the record. She could have confronted Marcus immediately. Instead, she asked Emily Carter to preserve the original printer log, lock the cafeteria footage against deletion, and say nothing until they understood what the missing receipt was connected to. Save the source file. Already copied. Not copied. Preserved. Emily studied Charlotte's face, then nodded and slipped her phone into her coat pocket. Across the corridor, Elijah tightened the loose wheel on a stainless steel supply cart, while Ava completed a worksheet on a bench within his sight. The wing carried the clean sting of alcohol wipes and warmed plastic. Infusion pumps clicked behind half-closed doors. Somewhere near the nurse's station, a printer released a page with a dry mechanical sigh. Then Elijah stopped moving. His wrench remained suspended against the wheel bolt. Do you hear that? He asked. The nurse beside him listened. Hear what? That low pulse. Dr. Victor Hale came around the corner reviewing a tablet. Mr. Brooks, the cart is the work order. Something behind that wall is cycling wrong. Victor did not slow. Facilities inspected this unit last month. Elijah placed 2 fingers against the metal panel beside the medication warmer. The surface trembled faintly beneath his calloused fingertips. It's warmer than it should be. Victor exhaled through his nose, not quite a sigh, but close enough to carry judgment. These devices regulate heat. Warmth is not evidence of failure. No, sir. Elijah lowered his hand. The rhythm is. The nearby conversations thinned. A chair that had been scraping across the floor stopped halfway through its movement. Charlotte heard the sound then. A faint, uneven vibration beneath the ventilation system. 3 soft pulses followed by a pause. Elijah looked toward an oxygen cylinder secured several feet away. Please move that tank. Victor's expression hardened. We are not interrupting treatment because a maintenance employee has a feeling. Elijah did not raise his voice. Then let engineering decide. But move the oxygen first. A nurse named Dana Cole looked from Victor to the wall panel. She had worked enough night shifts to recognize the difference between panic and restraint. She rolled the cylinder into the next bay. Victor lowered his tablet. You are exceeding your authority. Elijah reached for the localized breaker switch beneath the warmer. I'm preventing the authority from becoming an emergency. He cut power only to the affected outlet, then removed the panel with a screwdriver from his belt. A bitter smell escaped immediately. Hot rubber, scorched dust, and the metallic bite of overheated wiring. Inside, one connector had blackened along the edge. The insulation around it had begun to blister. No flamme. Not yet, but close enough that Dana stepped backward. The ventilation hum suddenly sounded enormous. Victor stared at the damaged connection, his tablet motionless in his hand. Elijah did not look at him. He disconnected the failed component, capped the live line, and marked the outlet with red service tape. Keep this warmer offline, he told Dana, and don't reconnect anything from this circuit until engineering clears the wall. You were right, she said. Elijah replaced the panel loosely so no one would mistake it for repaired. The wire was wrong. Victor recovered first. This should be handled privately. There is no benefit in alarming patients over a contained maintenance matter. I'm not alarming anyone. Elijah wrote the equipment code onto a service form. I'm documenting it. Marcus appeared at the far end of the hallway, summoned by a message Victor had sent before the panel was even opened. His tie was still exact, his voice still calm. Let's all avoid creating the wrong impression. Mr. Brooks has a tendency to become personally invested in operational concerns. Charlotte's eyes moved toward him. How did you know he had opened the panel? Marcus hesitated. Victor answered for him. I requested support. Elijah finished the form and handed the original to Dana rather than Marcus. He kept the carbon copy beneath the conduct report behind his badge. Run the device number, he said. There may be others from the same batch. Victor gave a restrained shake of his head. That determination belongs to clinical engineering. Then they'll have the number. Elijah returned to Ava, checked that she was all right, and quietly moved her bench farther from the closed outlet. She looked at the red tape on the wall. Was it dangerous? It needed fixing. Did you fix it? I made it safe enough for the right people to finish. Her shoulders loosened, and she returned to her spelling words. Charlotte watched the exchange, then sent Emily the equipment code. Within minutes, the original maintenance history appeared on Emily's screen. Elijah had reported the same vibration 3 weeks earlier. His warning had been closed without inspection under the note no immediate clinical risk. Defer to next budget cycle. The approval carried Victor Hale's electronic signature. That alone proved Elijah had not invented the danger. Proved someone had ignored him. But the next file changed the air again. The connector belonged to a production batch recalled 6 months earlier after 2 electrical fires at other Whitmore hospitals. St. Catherine had received the recall notice. The acknowledgement form had been signed, archived, and never acted upon. And the same administrative account that altered Receipt 4817 had also marked the recall as completed. The same administrative account that altered Receipt 4817 had also marked the electrical recall as completed. Emily Carter stared at the 2 audit entries on her tablet while the oncology printer released one final page and went still. Same login, she said. Different departments. Charlotte Whitmore looked through the glass wall at Elijah Brooks replacing his tools in the maintenance cart. How many records? I don't know yet. Find out before anyone knows we're looking. By noon, Emily had preserved the original cafeteria log, the equipment recall acknowledgement, and 3 years of B-17 transactions from the secondary register. The pattern did not appear all at once. It surfaced in small, almost harmless corrections. A payer name removed, a safety warning lowered in priority, a food expense moved into another category, a complaint closed with no interview. Each change looked explainable by itself. Together, they formed a habit. Charlotte met Rosa Martinez in an unused nutrition office behind the kitchen. The room smelled of cardboard, cinnamon, and old refrigerator coils. Sunlight slipped through narrow blinds and crossed a metal desk where Rosa placed a dented blue cookie tin. I kept copies, she said. Why? Emily asked. Rosa rubbed flour from the crease beside her thumbnail. Because people who work nights learn which records survive until morning. Inside were folded receipts, handwritten meal counts, payroll stubs with small cash amounts circled, and a generator repair invoice bearing Elijah's name. Receipt 4817 lay near the bottom. Its time matched the cafeteria camera. Its payment matched the $20 Elijah had placed into the envelope. Its handwritten note matched Rosa's entry in the printer log. Charlotte unfolded the generator invoice. The work had been completed for St. Catherine's Emergency Department after an overnight power fluctuation. Elijah had been paid $40. 20 had gone to B-17 before he and Ava entered the cafeteria. The plate Charlotte ate had not been discarded food. Elijah had bought it. He never told me, she said. Rosa looked at her temporary visitor badge. He doesn't know who you are. Charlotte's phone vibrated. The screen displayed a board security authorization request that only the chief executive could approve. Rosa saw the Whitmore crest, then slowly raised her eyes. She understood enough to become frightened. Am I losing my job? No, Charlotte said. Not for telling the truth. That's what people say before they decide truth is too expensive. The sentence left no room for reassurance without proof. Charlotte placed her phone face down. Then don't trust the promise yet. Trust what I document next. Rosa opened the tin again. Beneath the receipts was a list of initials and small weekly amounts. EB contributed when he had repair work. RM added cash from overtime. 2 night nurses, an ambulance driver, and a laundry worker gave what they could. Elijah had started B-17 after Miriam died, but he had never funded it alone. He had built a quiet circle of hourly workers who refused to let families go hungry while waiting for test results, surgery, or death. Why no names? Charlotte asked. Rosa handed her a faded card written in blue ink. No family should eat alone here. Beneath the sentence was Miriam Brooks's signature and the date of her final hospital admission. Elijah said hungry people shouldn't have to thank someone poorer than they are, Rosa said. He wanted the meal to feel like care, not debt. The office seemed to lose all sound. Even the kitchen fans beyond the wall faded beneath the weight of the card lying between them. Charlotte had spent years approving campaigns about dignity. Elijah had protected it without a budget, a title, or a photographer. Emily's tablet chimed. She had found the quarterly reports. Every B-17 meal funded by hourly employees had been credited to executive community leadership. The anonymous donations had been counted as institutional outreach, then used to satisfy charitable performance goals tied to management bonuses. A message from Marcus Doyle to finance appeared beside the figures. Do not identify hourly staff. Donors respond better to institutional leadership. Rosa sank into the chair. He knew. Yes, Emily said. But there's more. The reported B-17 spending exceeded the actual food costs by nearly 40%. The difference had not gone directly into Marcus's pocket. It had been transferred into donor hospitality, promotional photography, and executive events. Marcus entered the doorway before anyone heard him approach. His gaze went first to the cookie tin, then to Charlotte's phone, then to the camera dome above the hall outside. "This conversation should stop," he said. His voice remained professional, but moisture had gathered along his hairline. "Rosa may be violating records policy, and Ms. Whitmore should not be drawn into an internal dispute by employees with personal grievances." Charlotte did not correct the way he used her name. He still thought she was only a visitor whose identity Emily had quietly supplied. Elijah appeared behind him with a replacement filter under one arm. He saw Rosa's face, the open tin, and the card bearing Miriam's handwriting. Pain crossed his eyes before discipline covered it. "You kept that?" he asked.
Rosa nodded.
Marcus stepped between Elijah and the desk. "Mr. Brooks, this material is now part of a formal review. I suggest you return to your assigned duties." Elijah could have reached past him. He could have taken the receipts, named the lie, and demanded an answer. Instead, he looked at Rosa. "Did anyone threaten your job?" Marcus answered first. "No one is being threatened." Elijah kept his eyes on Rosa. "Did anyone?" Her silence was enough. Elijah set the filter down. "Then nothing leaves this room until she has a copy and someone signs that she turned it over voluntarily." Marcus's jaw shifted. "You are in no position to dictate procedure." "I'm not dictating it." Elijah glanced at the camera in the hallway. "I'm asking you to follow one." Charlotte watched Marcus look toward the lens before reaching for the tin. That glance decided what she would do next. She placed her hand on the lid. "No private settlement," she said. "No missing receipts. No deleted footage." Marcus's tone cooled. "You do not understand the consequences of making this public." Charlotte looked at the receipt, Miriam's card, the recall record, and the report showing food money redirected toward a donor dinner scheduled for the following night. "I understand them now." Elijah's first instinct was not revenge. "If this comes out," he said, "protect Rosa. Protect the nurses. Their names were supposed to stay private." Charlotte met his eyes. She no longer believed him because he seemed kind. She believed the records, the camera, the safety report, and the fact that even with the truth in reach, he was still protecting everyone but himself. Outside the office, Marcus quietly typed a message ordering the B-17 inventory transferred to the donor event before the audit could begin. Emily saw the order appear in real time. Charlotte read it once, then closed the tablet. The food meant for waiting families would be served under crystal lights the next evening, beneath a banner celebrating 3 years of compassionate leadership. The truth had become too large for an office, and by nightfall, everyone who had profited from the silence would be gathered in the very cafeteria where Elijah had been told he did not belong. By 6:30 the next evening, St. Catherine's cafeteria no longer looked like the place where Elijah Brooks had been told he did not belong. White tablecloths covered the window tables. Small glass lamps glowed beside folded napkins. A banner stretched across the far wall beneath the silver words "Compassion starts here." 3 years of compassionate leadership. The scent of roasted chicken and buttered herbs floated above the sharper smell of industrial cleaner. Donors arrived in dark suits and quiet jewelry, while hospital executives gathered near a podium Marcus Doyle had positioned beneath the banner. Elijah entered through the service doors wearing his faded Navy maintenance shirt. He had worked a full shift. A smear of graphite marked one sleeve, and the yellow conduct report still rested behind his scratched employee badge. Ava walked beside him carrying his metal lunchbox with both hands. She did not look at the donors. She looked at the table near the window where they had shared their last piece of bread. "Stay with Nurse Dana," Elijah told her. Ava took his hand before letting go. "I will." Charlotte Whitmore stood among the invited guests in the same plain coat she had worn the night before. Her temporary visitor badge remained turned inward. Emily Carter waited near the audiovisual controls with a tablet against her chest. Neither woman approached Elijah. Not yet. Marcus stepped to the podium and welcomed the room with the calm confidence of a man who believed preparation could control truth. "Tonight," he said, "we honor a program built through careful leadership, responsible stewardship, and a commitment to families in crisis." Behind him, A slide appeared showing smiling patients beside the B17 logo. No hourly employee was named. No donor contribution from Elijah, Rosa, the nurses, the ambulance driver, or the laundry worker appeared. Applause moved politely through the room. Then Rosa Martinez emerged from the kitchen carrying an empty stainless steel tray. She placed the dented blue cookie tin on top of it. Marcus's eyes followed the tin, but his smile did not break. "Before dinner," he continued, "I must address an unfortunate internal matter. Certain employees have operated an unauthorized food network outside approved safety and accounting procedures." Several heads turned toward Elijah. Victor Hale sat at the front table with a folder open before him. "The hospital cannot allow personal emotion to replace clinical judgment," he said. "Mr. Brooks has repeatedly interfered with operational authority, including an electrical shutdown in an active treatment area." For a moment, the room seemed to move back toward Marcus. The explanation sounded orderly. Liability, safety, unauthorized cash, an employee acting beyond his role. One donor murmured that rules existed for a reason. Marcus lifted Elijah's conduct report from the folder. "This is not punishment for kindness. It is protection against uncontrolled risk." Elijah did not walk toward the podium. He stood beside the service counter, tired and still. "Then show them the written rule I broke at the table," he said. Marcus held the report higher. "The issue is larger than seating. It became larger after you wrote it down." The room quieted. Emily touched the screen. A photograph appeared behind Marcus. His hand holding the original report, Elijah's empty chair, and the sign "Compassion starts here" above them. Beneath the image was a search result from the employee handbook. No reserved professional seating policy existed. Marcus did not flinch. That was an informal courtesy standard. Poorly communicated, perhaps, but unrelated to the financial irregularities. Retention shifted again. He had conceded a minor mistake while preserving the larger accusation. Victor opened his folder and displayed a copy of the warning against Elijah for interfering with clinical operations. "And this," he said, "documents a pattern." Elijah looked at the page. "Does it include the burned connector?" Victor stopped. Emily placed a photograph beside the warning. Blackened insulation, red service tape, and the serial number of the recalled equipment batch. Then came Elijah's original report from 3 weeks earlier, followed by Victor's electronic closure note. "No immediate clinical risk. Defer to next budget cycle." A chair leg scraped once against the floor and stopped. Victor closed the folder slowly. Marcus stepped in before the silence could settle. "A maintenance oversight does not validate an unauthorized charity system." Rosa opened the cookie tin. She removed receipt 4817 and placed it on the tray. Emily enlarged the receipt on the screen. The timestamp read 10:58 p.m. The payer field had originally read EB. A second image showed the field edited at 6:00 for the next morning using Marcus's credentials. "That receipt was voided because the transaction was improper," Marcus said. "And the words generator job?" Charlotte asked from among the donors. Marcus looked toward her. "A private notation." Elijah reached behind his badge and unfolded the carbon copy of the generator repair invoice. He did not raise it dramatically. He placed it beside receipt 4817 under the nearest lamp. The dates matched. The amount matched. The cafeteria camera timestamp matched. "I'm not here to punish anybody," Elijah said. "I'm here because hungry people shouldn't lose dinner while adults decide whose name belongs on it." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his tone remained professional. "Even if Mr. Brooks paid for isolated meals, that does not establish ownership of B17. The program was administered by hospital leadership." Emily touched the screen again. Before the next file opened, Marcus signaled to the kitchen. 2 staff members began rolling covered carts toward the donor tables. Rosa stepped in front of them. "Those are tonight's family meals." Marcus turned to the room. Excess inventory was reassigned to prevent waste. Emily displayed the transfer order. It read B17 excess inventory, donor hospitality, approved by M. Doyle. The program Marcus claimed did not exist had just supplied the evening's appetizers. The donors stopped reaching for their glasses. Marcus looked toward security. This presentation has become misleading. Please escort Mr. Brooks and Ms. Martinez from the service area while we review the records properly. Elijah moved between Rosa and the approaching officer. He did not square his shoulders or raise his hands. If someone has to leave, let it be me. She kept the records because nobody else would. Then he turned to Dana. Ava was already standing safely behind the nurse, clutching the metal lunchbox against her sweater. Stay there, baby girl. Ava nodded, then pointed toward the tray. Dad, that's the same one. Her voice was small, but everyone heard it. The stainless steel tray from the first night sat beneath receipt 4817, its faded B17 mark, visible along the rim. Charlotte stepped away from the donor table. Marcus lifted one hand toward security. Ma'am, this is an internal hospital matter. Yes, Charlotte said. It is. Emily moved beside the projector. The cafeteria camera file waited unopened on the screen. Marcus looked at Charlotte's inward-facing visitor badge, then at the quiet authority with which the room had begun to make space for her. And who exactly are you to stop this event? He asked. Charlotte reached beneath her coat, drew out a second identification card, and placed her thumb over the name before setting it beside the stainless steel tray. Play the footage first, she told Emily. The lights dimmed, the security video loaded, and Charlotte lifted her hand from the card. The security footage began with the same stainless steel tray now sitting beneath the projector screen. On the wall, Elijah Brooks appeared in his faded maintenance shirt, Ava beside him, and Charlotte Whitmore lowering herself into the empty chair. The timestamp read 10:51 p.m. No one in the cafeteria moved as the recorded Charlotte asked, "Can I stay?" Elijah looked at his daughter, then pushed the final plate toward a woman whose name he did not know. Ava broke her bread in half. Marcus Doyle's voice came through the speakers next. Some seats are reserved for people the hospital depends on. Then Elijah answered from the screen, calm enough to make the cruelty around him sound louder. Everybody in here depends on somebody. The footage froze on his open hand beside the tray. Charlotte removed her thumb from the identification card. Her photograph appeared beside the words Chief Executive Officer, Whitmore Health Systems. Marcus stared at the card as if the letters might rearrange themselves. Victor Hale's folder slipped against the edge of the table. Ms. Whitmore, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its practiced warmth. I was not aware. That is the point, Charlotte replied. She did not raise her voice. She looked toward the donors, the nurses, the kitchen staff, and the families now standing near the rear doors. Mr. Brooks did not know who I was. He did not know what I owned, what authority I carried, or what I could give him. He saw a frightened woman with nowhere to sit, and he gave her the last meal he had purchased for himself and his child. Emily advanced the presentation. Receipt 4817 appeared beside the generator repair invoice. Both carried the same date, the same amount, and the same cafeteria timestamp. Then came the printer audit showing Marcus's credentials removing EB from the payer field at 6:00 for the following morning. Marcus placed one hand on the podium. His fingers tightened against the wood. The transaction was voided because it violated procedure. Emily displayed the employee handbook search, followed by the B-17 register and the transfer order for the donor dinner. There was no written seating policy, Charlotte said. There was no closed program when meals were being counted toward performance targets. And there was no excess inventory when families upstairs were still waiting to eat. The next screen showed the list of anonymous contributions preserved in Rosa's cookie tin. Small amounts, $5, $8, $12. Names reduced to initials because the people giving had asked for no recognition. Elijah stood near the service counter, his face still, but his eyes moved when Miriam's handwritten card appeared. No family should eat alone here. Charlotte let the words remain on the wall for several seconds. The projector fan became audible. Somewhere near the kitchen, ice settled inside a metal bin. B-17 was not built by executive leadership, she said. It was built by hourly workers whose names were removed because someone believed compassion looked better when it came from a boardroom. Marcus swallowed. Those reports reflected institutional administration. They reflected institutional theft of credit. Emily opened the audit summary. 40% of the reported B-17 spending had been redirected into donor hospitality, promotional photography, and performance metrics tied to management bonuses. No single line showed Marcus pocketing cash. The truth was colder than that. He had turned the sacrifices of low-wage workers into a polished story that rewarded the people above them. Victor stood. Whatever happened. With the meals, the safety issue is separate. The photograph of the burned connector appeared before he finished. Beside it sat Elijah's original warning, Victor's dismissal, and the manufacturer's recall notice acknowledged 6 months earlier. It is not separate, Charlotte said. It is the same pattern. A maintenance worker speaks, and the system lowers his voice. A kitchen employee keeps records, and the system calls her difficult. Families need food, and the system calls them inventory. Victor's pen rolled from his folder and struck the floor. No one bent to retrieve it. Marcus looked toward the security camera mounted above the cafeteria doors, then toward the donors who had stopped touching their glasses. We were trying to protect the hospital, he said. Charlotte faced him. From whom? He had no answer that could survive the room. Charlotte announced the actions in a voice as steady as the evidence. Marcus would be placed on paid administrative leave pending an independent investigation. Victor would be removed from the safety committee while the recall failures were reviewed. Elijah's conduct report would be voided immediately. Rosa and every cooperating employee would receive written protection against retaliation. The donor dinner would end, and all prepared food would be served first to patients and waiting families. The audit would be released after legal review, not buried in an internal memo. One donor rose and offered to cover the cost of the meals. Charlotte shook her head. This institution will not convert accountability into a photo opportunity. Then she turned toward the back of the room. If you have ever received a B-17 meal, please raise your hand. First, no one moved. Then the older veteran from the elevator lifted his hand. The mother from room 714 raised hers. A nurse near the door followed, then an ambulance driver, a former patient, 2 environmental services workers, and a man who said the meal had kept him beside his wife during her final night. More hands rose until the room looked less like an audience and more like a testimony no report could contain. Ava stood safely beside Nurse Dana, holding Elijah's metal lunchbox. Against her chest, she looked at the hands, then up at her father. Elijah breathed out slowly. Charlotte offered him the microphone. He did not take it at first. When he finally did, he spoke only long enough to protect the people still vulnerable. Rosa keeps her job. The night staff choose whether their names are shared. No pictures of my daughter. And the meals upstairs go out before anything else happens in this room. Charlotte nodded. Agreed. Elijah placed the microphone back on the tray. Then we're done talking for now. A spoon slipped from someone's plate and struck the tile. The sound rang beneath the fluorescent lights, small and silver and impossibly clear. Marcus stared at the floor. Victor looked away from the screen. No one applauded because applause would have made the moment easier than it deserved to be. The room simply stood inside the truth. Later, after the meals had been carried upstairs and the donors had left without dessert, Charlotte asked Elijah to meet her in the boardroom. On the polished table waited a reimbursement agreement, a newly created leadership position, and enough money to change his daughter's life. Elijah remained standing, one hand resting on the back of the empty chair. The hospital had finally given him power, recognition, and a choice. The only question left was what a man who had never used kindness as currency would decide to do with all three. By the time the boardroom door closed, the cafeteria had emptied without applause. Marcus Doyle had surrendered his access badge to Human Resources and left through the side corridor under paid administrative leave. Victor Hale had been removed from the safety committee pending review. Rosa Martinez had received a written protection order against retaliation before she returned to the kitchen. Upstairs, the B-17 meals had been delivered while they were still warm. On the polished table before Elijah Brooks lay three things: a reimbursement agreement for every documented dollar he had contributed, an offer to become director of community care, and a release authorizing the hospital to use his story in a public campaign. Charlotte Whitmore sat across from him, no temporary badge now, no hidden title, only the tired face of a woman who had finally seen what her own institution had become. "You earned this," she said. Elijah remained standing, one hand resting on the back of the chair. "I earned my wages. You built something this hospital took credit for. I helped keep it alive. Then let us recognize you." Elijah looked through the boardroom glass toward the cafeteria below. The stainless steel tray still sat on one table beneath the dimmed lights. Receipt 4817 rested on it beneath a clear evidence sleeve, no longer a scrap that could be torn away or hidden in a drawer. "Recognition isn't the same as repair," he said. Charlotte lowered her eyes to the documents. "Tell me what repair looks like." Elijah sat then, not because the title impressed him, but because she had finally asked the right question. He accepted the reimbursement, but only after changing the terms. Part would go into an education account for Ava, because his daughter's needs should never again be treated as the invisible cost of his generosity. The rest would become seed funding for a permanent meal program. He declined the executive title and the publicity release. Instead, he requested a paid advisory role connected to the work he actually understood: facility safety, night shift operations, and family support. "Don't put my face on a banner," he said. "Put the rules where everybody can read them." Within weeks, B17 became Miriam's table. Its budget was approved by the board and audited every quarter. Hourly workers, nurses, kitchen staff, and patient family representatives received voting seats on the oversight committee. No one had to prove poverty before receiving a meal. No food could be redirected to donor functions. Maintenance warnings from frontline employees could be escalated directly to an independent safety panel. The window tables in the cafeteria were no longer reserved by title, rank, or influence. Marcus was not publicly humiliated. The investigation found that he had altered records, misrepresented the source of charitable contributions, and retaliated against employees who challenged him. He lost his management position, repaid the performance bonus tied to the false reports, and was offered the possibility of future non-supervisory work only after completing ethics training. Victor was required to correct every safety report he had improperly closed and spend supervised hours with the family support department before he could apply for another committee role. Their second chances did not erase consequences. They began with them. Rosa became the coordinator of Miriam's table, though she refused every request for an interview. Elijah continued wearing his Navy maintenance shirt and carrying the same scratched toolbox through St. Catherine's halls. His personnel file no longer contained the conduct report. In its place was a formal commendation that did not call him poor, heroic, or extraordinary. It read, "He identified a need, built trust, protected patients, and acted consistently when no recognition was available." Ava received new shoes before her school music program, but that was not what changed her. What changed her was watching adults correct the record without asking her to carry their anger. She performed with the other children beneath warm auditorium lights while Elijah sat in the back row, still smelling faintly of machine oil after his shift. Charlotte arrived alone and took the seat beside the empty chair between them. She did not speak during the performance. Neither did he. Their silence was no longer the silence of people hiding pain. It was the quiet of two adults learning that trust could be built without promises. Charlotte's father died peacefully several days later. Before he passed, he told her that authority mattered only when people without authority felt safe enough to speak. She returned to Miriam's table each Thursday, not as its owner, but as another pair of hands beside Rosa. Respect became familiarity. Familiarity became trust. Whatever might come after that was allowed to arrive slowly. One evening, several weeks later, Charlotte entered the cafeteria without an assistant or visible badge. Ava sat at the old window table with 3 full plates in front of her. Elijah was repairing the torn corner of her library book with a narrow strip of tape. The stainless steel tray from that first night had been cleaned and returned to service. Its faded B-17 mark remained along the rim. Charlotte stopped beside the empty chair. "Can I stay?" Elijah looked at Ava. Ava smiled and moved her backpack from the seat. Elijah pulled the chair out. "There's room." No one turned to see who Charlotte was. No one asked why Elijah belonged at the table. The lights hummed softly above them while steam rose from 3 ordinary meals. On the wall, "Compassion starts here" remained in silver letters, but beneath it hung a smaller sign chosen by the night staff. "No one eats alone. No one's dignity is above another's." For a moment, the cafeteria became quiet. Not from shock, not from fear, but because everyone understood. The tray was only a tray again, the receipt only paper, and the empty chair only a place to sit. Yet kindness had remembered what power tried to erase, and in the hands of people who refused to look away, quiet dignity had become justice.